the reality distortion field and iterate and debug, a management style, both are prevalent within Elon Musk's companies. I've been thinking a lot about the competition that Tesla is facing and also the trolling that Tesla is dealing with in particular Herbert Diess, but also with the Ford CEO and other people. I think overall, my summary here is that it's about the reality distortion field and it's about iterate and debug. Those two management styles will determine who's going to win in this competition against Tesla. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's March 14, 2021. This is Kremdelko. It's a Sunday. There's no updates. Let me jump right into the topic. The topic is, in general terms, similar to last week's topics, where I spoke about the trolling, about Herbert Diess, about the Ford CEO, about these risks that Tesla is facing, but also about the necessity for people like Herbert Diess or any kind of car CEO, how to compete with Tesla. And I think if you boil it down, if you take all the unknowns out of the equation, so everything which is doable, let me say it that way. So you have technology, you have manufacturing, you have battery technology, you have software, and we've spoken about this many times, the three vectors that we think Tesla needs to be excelling at, which is battery technology, AI, and manufacturing technology. Those are all the things that need to happen. But the actual software, the actual soft management skills that are necessary to get there, and this is the key. Like, why isn't Volkswagen able to build a software company a la Tesla? Why isn't, for that matter, anybody able to just build a software company, compete with, let's say, Salesforce.com or with Zoom, with Snowflake, all these Twilio, you name all these companies that are coming out of the woodwork, the Silicon Valley startups, the unicorns, I don't know, however you want to call them. The fundamental question is, why isn't anybody just able to compete with Silicon Valley in the first place? What is going on? Software is a commodity globally. You can hire software engineers in Berlin, in Shanghai, in Jakarta. Engineering is a commodity. Everything is known. We know how to do things. We know how a lithium-ion battery is supposed to work. We know the general concepts of blockchain. We know the general concepts of the Byzantine fault tolerance problem. I don't know, whatever problem you're attacking, whatever software problem you're attacking in particular, it's known. It's not like a secret that Silicon Valley is guarding. It's all open, but nevertheless, it's always the Silicon Valley companies that win. And the answer to why this is happening is really two things: reality distortion field and iterate and debug. Now, I'm going to elaborate what that means. The reality distortion field is something that was popularized through Steve Jobs in his biography by Walter Isaacson. It pretty much means the following. It means that you're a CEO with a vision and you bridge reality with your vision. Ben Horowitz calls this innovation. It's simply the CEO believes in something that nobody else believes in, and he makes it happen. And he's able to excite his employees, in particular his key engineers, to follow the dream. It also means that you bridge between facts and what's realizable today and what you might be able to do. In practical terms, let's say when Elon Musk was trying to do a landable rocket for SpaceX, this was a dream. It was very difficult to do, but his engineers started believing in it because he believed in it. It's also, culture is what you do, not what you say. So you obviously have to follow through. So for example, Elon Musk already now doesn't believe in the concept of mobility anymore. The mobility concept is not what Elon Musk is about. He wants entertainment on wheels. Why? Because mobility sounds a little bit like going to the dentist. Like, who wants to actually go from A to B? It's painful. The street, the traffic, the time wasting, it's uncomfortable. Well, you can make this comfortable. You can make this entertaining. You can make it entertaining by either have a fun drive, so you have a Plaid Plus Model S, which is fun to drive, or like most of us, we'll probably not spend $150,000 for a fun drive, but we will have entertainment options in our self-driving car. So what Musk is attacking here is a future problem that that doesn't even exist. People like Herbert Diess at Volkswagen are still talking about e-mobility and things like that. because they're stuck in the old world where we have to go from A to B and we have to do this somehow, and we buy a car to do that. Musk is solving the problem of being bored, of wasting time on wheels through at least through one vector, which is entertainment. You could also add productivity here, but in the end, it's the same concept, which is there is something you need to do, which is go from A to B, but that's not the actual thing that you want to do. What you really want to do is either work or be entertained. So this is, in a sense, it's a vision, it's an innovation, but there's a reality distortion field, which is he's talking about robo-taxis and self-driving cars and feature complete full self-driving, where most people are saying this is not going to happen. What is he talking about? This is a utopia. I don't know. I don't even know what the words anymore are. But the fundamental thesis, particularly in the car industry, and also, by the way, in the self-driving car industry, look at Cruise, look at Google. Everybody's trying to protect their turf by pretending that Tesla is way out of their league, that they will not succeed because they can't succeed. So my point here is the following. I think that the only way that you can succeed in the game of competing with Tesla is by using all the techniques and all the cultures that Tesla is employing. And I've said that, I think, very early on in this podcast, that I define disruption in the end, the concept of fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices with large impact leads to wealth creation if the company which is applying the fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices, if that company defines the market. And what I mean with define the market is really not just having a high market share, but defines the practices, the actual culture of how to compete. This is the key, and this is what Tesla has done. So for people to compete with Tesla, they have to apply reality distortion field and iterate and debug. The reality distortion field is when you bridge that gap between what's possible today factually and what the dream is. In other words, you solve problems towards a vision, towards the North Star. You create an innovation stack. You create an innovation stack a la Jim McKelvey, where you go from solving one small problem, you build that stack towards the solution to a much bigger problem. So for example, like Jim McKelvey with Square, he wanted to actually solve one simple problem, which is an artist wanted to accept a payment, but then he went all the way towards basically revolutionizing the payment system using crypto and whatnot to make Square one of the largest financial services companies in the world. So this is the reality distortion field. It's not lying. It's very important. If you believe in something that is not possible today, that's not lying. If you lie in a la Volkswagen, for example, if you say we have a solution for diesel and that solution is X, but it's not really X, it's Y, and stuff like that, that's lying. The reality distortion field is, look, I can create an internet communicator or something that we call a smartphone that will revolutionize the way people communicate with smartphones. And hence, we are going to create the iPhone. And the iPhone in 2003 and 4 and 5 and whatnot, when these things were conceptualized, of course, was completely outside of the reality of what was possible. And it certainly wasn't a lie. It was just, again, it was entering the reality distortion field. So number one, if you are, let's say, Ford or GM or Volkswagen, you want to compete with Tesla, welcome to the reality distortion field. The acid test for anybody who wants to compete with Tesla is not, can they make a battery? Can they do this? Can they do that? Can they actually bridge from factual engineering type thinking to the reality distortion field, which is a different way of thinking. It's a different way of thinking. It's very engineering driven, of course. There's a lot of engineering in the reality distortion field, but it's reality distortion. It's not reality and it's not distortion, it's both. The second, I want to mention the second, let's say, competitive necessity, or the second imperative for anybody who wants to compete with Tesla, is iterate and debug. You run your company the way a software project is run. Software eats the world doesn't just mean that you can apply software to everything. You have to run your company like software. You have to run, your company has to be run like a software project. If your company is a software company, well, then you have to run it like a software company, and you run a software company the way you run a software project. You can't separate one from the other. So iterate, debug, this is how software projects are run, particularly open source. This is also why open source is so successful, because the more diversity you have, the more iteration you have, and the more debugging you have, the faster you get to the solution. Now, this all sounds very nice. I think probably there must be somewhere a management book already written about this. If not, then okay, I'll claim that maybe I'm one of the first people to actually put this in public, but it doesn't matter. I don't care about these things. What I really care about here is the following. I think that if you run your company like you run a software project, then you are a software company. You're not a software company by deciding you are a software company. You're not a software company by hiring software people. There is plenty of bad software being written by very, very highly educated software people. So software can only be produced in a productive way if it's done like any good software project is done, which is iterate and debug. What does that mean? Iterate means you start something and then you find the problem, i.e. debug, and then you start again. Now, the debugging in the context of management, it's much harder than you think. What does that mean? Why is Elon Musk famous for always going to the core of the problem of any kind of, let's say, if there's a failure of something in SpaceX, in Eric Steiger's book about SpaceX, he talks about Musk singling out the engineer who was responsible for a specific failure of a launch. Now, what is he doing here? Is he shaming people? Is he trying to make you feel bad? No, he's debugging. That's exactly what you do in a software project. You debug, you find the problem. And then, well, maybe that even means you fire the person, but it definitely means you have to single the problem out. You have to say, well, you are the problem. It's your lack of this or that, or your failure, or you forgetting, or whatever it is. It needs to be pointed out. It needs to be clarified. It needs to be made clear. And this is what debugging means. Now, in the real world, in the reality of running a company, this is very difficult. Imagine how egos and careers and emotions are being affected by this. It's terrible. But it's the way to do it. And again, I have a question to Herbert Diess and anybody else who wants to challenge Tesla. Are you able to iterate and debug? Is this really what you can commit to as a company? Or are you going to call yourself a software company and then still run it in a different way? Let's say in the case of Volkswagen or any car company, they're famous for having very long lead times, taking it very slow and linearly plan things because they can't allow for mistakes. They're saying it's because of safety. Well, Tesla needs to be able to iterate and debug with safety. That's the challenge. It's an additional vector. It's an additional variable you have to be conscious about, which is safety. But you still have to iterate and debug because you're not going to get anywhere if you don't iterate and debug. So to summarize, there's the two things that I think are absolutely key for anybody who wants to compete with Tesla. And that is, number one, reality distortion field. Number two, iterate and debug. Both of them are very, very difficult to implement. Both of them are, in my view, the secrets of success for Silicon Valley companies. They're ready to make mistakes, ready to go and crack things and crash and make mistakes. They can do this even within the context of safety. This is a constraint. It's not a showstopper. And the reality distortion field, it's another very difficult concept, particularly for CEOs, because they have to step out of their comfort zone. The reality distortion field is me going in a 20-foot wave and thinking I can do it. There is a small anecdote I want to finish this episode with. My son plays MLS Academy in his age group here in San Francisco, and they had a scrimmage recently, and the coach invited some players. He always does that. He gives players from lower teams the chance to experience the high-level soccer. So there was this one kid. My son was actually injured, so he was sitting on the bench watching the game with his team, and there was this one kid, and he was invited with another kid from a lower team. And that one kid, he kept telling the other guy, hey, listen, you might as well take this as a positive. Don't be nervous. You look at this as like you can only win. You can't lose here. And the kid was so positive, and then he went on the field and he scored 2 goals and he won the game. So there is this, you can think yourself successfully, and this is what the reality distortion field really means. It means it's really like this stepping out of your comfort zone and starting to believe in your own dreams. This is very, very difficult to do. And I challenge any established manager in any kind of industrial company to do that. I think this is a necessary, not sufficient, but necessary condition to compete with Tesla. Thank you.